Okay, there we go. We're live. Alison, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely to actually get the chance to do this with you. I've been wanting to have a chat with you and talk about the business in a bit more detail, so I'm quite excited today. But let's just kind of set the scene a little bit. In terms of you and the business and what you do, how would you explain what you do to a relative at, say, a Christmas dinner who's never heard of Flow Health?
Oh, that's a good question. Because I have to explain to my 7-year-old son what I do quite a lot.
Yeah.
So Flow Health is the largest women's health app in the world, and essentially we help women to understand their cycles better, their bodies better. Um, we are empowering women to have better outcomes for female health, so that you're more informed right from being a teenager when you get your first period all the way through to menopause, and all the things that happen to women throughout all of that as well. I've been at Flow for 4.5 years, have been here since it was an app that actually very few people had heard of it in the UK when I first joined Flow. But now, honestly, most people, when I go to an event, many women who I speak to know Flow or use Flow in
Mm.
the UK, and it's huge all over the world. We have, I think, over 73 million monthly active users now, which is quite phenomenal. The area that I work in, difficult to describe, but I oversee a number of the product and engineering teams that are all the powerhouse of the content features that you would see and recognize on Flow, as well as the engineering platform team that powers all of the localization of Flow into different markets. And a huge part of what I'm doing at the moment is looking about how we automate or use AI in all of that platform work that goes on. So how do we use AI to automate our processes, to speed up our experimentation, to generate more content on the app?
Mm.
So a lot of internal use cases. Prior to that, I've spent about the last 2 years at Flow working on conversational AI. So I've run, with the teams, quite a number of different sorts of experiments on conversational AI chatbots. Did a huge amount on how we're going to evaluate those chatbots over the last year. So looking at data sets, looking at judges, so laying a lot of the foundations actually for what I'm doing now with my new role. And so, yeah, all of the experimentation on conversational AI has been hugely beneficial and hugely informative as to how we're going to use AI actually internally at Flow as well.
Mm.
And to go back to when I started Flow, so I was originally just a regular senior product manager at Flow. That's where I started at Flow. So I used to manage the health assistant chatbot, which would pop up and say, like, "Can I talk to you about your cramps?" So that was where I started at Flow.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so that's a bit about what I do. But my son sort of understands.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Fair enough. I mean, that's quite a transformation in 4.5 years. So the largest women's health app in the world and over 73 million monthly active users compared to where you was when you started. So yeah, transformative is the word I use. I mean, what's that down to?
It's down to many different things. Flow has been hugely successful through word of mouth. So in the States, it's a huge market. Many people come to Flow for the accuracy of the period tracking, for the
Mm.
accuracy that it knows when your period, when you're going to ovulate. So many people are sort of blown over by how scarily accurate it is. But once people arrive at Flow, it's almost like they come for the prediction, but they stay because of the kind of all-encompassing female health app that it is. So Flow has always been, well, it always was when it started, very different to its competitors. It was this well-rounded female health app. It had a chat bot, it had stories like swipeable content, it has
Mm.
a huge range of articles underpinned by an army of clinicians. It has a community, like a kind of we have a forum that sits on Flow completely free, which women can use anonymously to ask questions, called Secret Chats. So it's always had it's never just been a period tracker. It's always been more like a female health partner right from the start. And I think that's what set it out in what was a very cluttered market of cycle period tracking apps that it was like 10 years ago. So.
Oh, really? I didn't realize there were so many competitors in the market.
Yeah, so there was, because actually 10 years ago when Flow started, weirdly was about the time that I started tracking my periods on app. So I remember very distinctly what those early period tracking apps were like.
Oh, so you used a couple of different ones.
I used a few of them. I remember the days of like the P Tracker app. I remember what it looked like. It was just like a calendar.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was like a glorified calendar, and it did look like, I don't know, many of those apps in those early days kind of gave you kind of PTSD of like, I don't know, MSN apps, you know, they were very like flashed all over the place. And it was really based around just a calendar. So this whole kind of cluttered space of lots of sort of calendar based apps was really ripe for someone to sort of come in and shake it up like Flow did.
Well, I know that Flow is quite a popular app in my household. So when before Esther was born, it was quite a popular thing that my wife would be showing me, and it kind of blew my mind as a man looking at all these screens and all these things and this data and all this information that she was sharing with me. So yeah, I'm not surprised that it's had the kind of impact it's had on the market, but good for good reasons, right? So you mentioned about kind of the internal AI tools and everything that you're working on, which is really, really cool. And we're going to dive into all of that. Before this recording, you and I spoke before about a few things, and you developed and launched the first conversational AI at Flow. So what I wanted to ask you was what that process looked like and what insights you've managed to gain from the beta rollout.
Yeah, so we started a couple of years ago looking at conversational AI, and I definitely, on reflection, didn't get it right to start with. And I think now, I think when you're looking at customer facing use cases of AI, I think most product people nowadays know that you have to start with like a problem to solve.
Yeah.
And a clear kind of why you're doing it, because it was quite exciting at the time that ChatGPT came out. And of course, we looked at our original health assistant. It's still very successful feature on Flow. So immediately, you have just tons of ideas all over the place of like, oh, what can we do with our current chatbot to kind of enhance the user experience? There's so much that you can possibly do, and so many use cases that you can look at. So it was very difficult to sort of pick one. And we did have a few false starts as well with trying to sort of land a proposition. I think once we actually did sit down and really do the proper product work and look at a why, that's when we kind of came to the idea of this cycle guide, which is our first kind of full beta proposition. Before that, we'd looked at a sex coach actually to accompany a program, but the cycle guide was actually built to solve problems that exist for users on the app who are trying to, like, it's quite hard to find, like when you're going to ovulate, you have to go to the calendar and click through and find, when am I going to ovulate in my next cycle, in 2 months cycles time, or are my periods irregular, are my cycles irregular? These kind of things, you have to do quite a lot of work yourself to get the answer through scrolling different graphs or through scrolling the calendar. So we had identified quite a lot of, at this point, we identified problems to solve from the kind of core experience of Flow, and also problems to solve from our chatbot experience. And I think doing that proper product work was what led us to like quite a good focused proposition. And again, because we're super tempted to make that proposition everything, not only cycles but symptoms and symptom patterns, and
roll it out across the board.
Data, like it can very easily spiral. So you had to be a very focused product person and think MVP, like a core set of data, a core set of focus for that product, with how we were going to work on it. So once we had landed that proposition, things got a lot easier. But then we had this huge learning as over that, I guess, that 9 months about evaluation, because as I found, like, anybody can almost build a product, an AI powered product, but you have no, if you have no idea how good it is, then you're kind of lost, like, because immediately you need to know, like, is it medically safe? How are you going to say whether it's medically safe or not? Is it accurate?
Giving bad advice.
Yeah. Is it useful? You know, one person thinks it's useful, another person thinks it's terrible, and these are people's subjective opinions. So immediately you're starting to think of, well, we need a framework to evaluate our LLM, to say whether it's medically safe, accurate, to say whether it's useful and valuable, and how are we going to measure that? And that process took us a huge amount of time. Now that we've done it, it will inevitably make us, as we test other beta propositions, which we are now, a lot easier putting those foundations in place. But it took us, you know, quite a steep learning curve to do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, right? I mean, these things, they take a lot of time to get right, but then once they're right, it's like, bang, okay, we can roll that out now, or we have a process that we know what we're doing. We can massively speed up the time to production or the time to test and fail, which is the whole point. So that initial pain of like trial and error is something you have to kind of go through and pull your hair out with.
Yeah, you basically, what it comes down to is that you need a scalable process if you're going to be building an AI-powered customer-facing product, to be able to build it, test, iterate, go again. So, and if it's going to take you 3 months to perform an evaluation on a model, you don't have a scalable process. So how can you make other iterations of that model, or how are you going to test other propositions if you don't have that scalable process? So it was really, it's really important groundwork that we did, which is now kind of being taken forward by one of my product managers for experimenting with new propositions in conversational AI. So.
Perfect. So it can be rolled out across the business. So you spoke about it briefly there when you said about how it's going to change, you know, doing the hard work at the beginning is going to change how you then do things after that. And my follow-on question was about working with LLMs. You said previously as well that it's fundamentally changed your approach to product development as a whole, right? Rather than just specifically what we're talking about here. So what are some of the kind of main differences now today compared to, I guess, more traditional product builds?
Yeah, I think the measurement is a really key part. So now I think if I was going to give anybody any advice who said, oh, we're thinking about, you know, building an AI powered chatbot in our organization, like, where would you, we started knocking together a prompt, like, where would you start? I say right at the start, when you script that first prompt, to script the evaluation beside it with how you would measure whether an output that it spits out is any good or not. Even having that roughly scripted is extremely important, because you have no idea, you have a very subjective way of improving it. So I think the development and the evaluation have to go hand in hand. The other aspect that, you know, certainly I found, and I think many organizations face at the start of certainly building a customer-facing AI product, is that you don't have much resource to start with. You don't have a team. You might be given like one engineer to start having to build something with. So even at the start, I realized the value of doing prototypes, and I was making AI prototypes without even realizing that they were a thing. You know, now they are this huge thing in product, that, you know, building AI prototypes is hugely beneficial. But I did that, you know, when we were thinking of a proposition like the cycle guide proposition with my product designer. We scripted a custom GPT app. We fed it some dummy data to simulate what the experience was going to look like. And we tested that custom GPT app with some users. It didn't look like Flow at all, but we've got, you know, 20 users to interact with that, just a custom GPT app, but it simulated how the conversation might be. and we gave them some visuals to look at, saying, imagine if this conversation was in somewhere that looked kind of like this. You see, now you could probably do that with Lovable or Replit pretty easily, but going back to 18 months ago, but we were in that mode of thinking about AI prototyping that feature even before AI prototyping was a thing. So
you when you're prototyping new features and kind of building new features and wanting to roll out all these cool things, do you test with people that are paying customers on the app, or do you have focus groups within Flow that test these?
So we don't do focus groups. We use an online platform for all of our testing. We have a really strong UX research team at Flow. So when we're doing we do quite a lot of different sort of testing. We do sort of prototype testing, but we've also done real, we call them diary studies, but they are sort of semi-ethnographic studies where people would actually use the app and we observe them using it in a real state. That is obviously more kind of costly to do. So we do a lot of prototyping. Those people are a mix. And our UX research team, depending on the brief, will determine the makeup of the sample, whether it's a mix of free users or pay users, depending on what you're testing, whether we're testing just users who are in the States, which is our kind of first market, versus sometimes we're doing research that is looking at people in different countries. So it's often you as a product person might provide a brief to your UXR, and they will work with you in partnership to determine the methodology that they would use and who exactly you would test it with. That's
very cool. It's cool that you can test with that live study groups, right, rather than kind of like a closed group.
We're lucky. We're very lucky, because I know many people who don't have the luxury of a UX research team or a nice platform for running moderated or unmoderated testing. They are expensive, and for smaller startups, I know they're out of the range. But even when I didn't work at Flow and I worked in a little venture as part of Bupa, we didn't have any budget for this sort of thing, and I went out and did my own interviews and showed cool visuals. I spoke to consultants. I spoke to, cardiologists and obstetricians and gynecologists, and I showed them what we were building with, like, this is, what do you think? And I conducted my own interviews when I had no budget. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's very cool. The whole live patient type thing, live case study type thing, I think is always real, because you get instant feedback like that, and if somebody doesn't like something, they won't be afraid to tell you. So you get the real hard truth, which is good for product development, right? It's what you want from the outset. One thing you mentioned right at the start of this was about you mentioned it a couple of times, content. So content production, you mentioned like stories mode and things like that. So content production can sometimes be a bit of a bottleneck, especially in today's world. So when it comes to AI tooling, can you just talk a little bit about how it's helped you accelerate content production process, and what maybe are some of the opportunities you see in scaling personalization at speed?
Yeah, so it was one of my teams, which is the chatbot team, actually, who pioneered a lot of this work in winter last year. And so the AI use cases that they looked at was first of all how to use a prompt to generate a branch-based chatbot. So bearing in mind, we're talking about very short, kind of quick informational chatbots. So not AI, these are branch-based chatbots that you could talk to it maybe about your cycle phase, or or like about your pregnancy trimester. So informational chatbots where you're kind of conveying some health information. So how could you script a prompt that would generate you a nice kind of tree, basically, of how you're going to go through this kind of interactive chatbot. We also very quickly started thinking about evaluation and review as well. So I wouldn't say we've completely nailed that part, but 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 there's definitely a case for using LLMs to automate the review process. So when you have content that is frequently reviewed by a proofreader, by an editor, by a medical advisor, by a legal person, and they are performing essentially a set of checks manually.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a strong argument to say, like, could we just script a prompt with those checks in order to run an eval to see whether those checks have been performed correctly or not. We didn't implement this yet into chatbots. What we implemented was the content generation part. So so we built we built it just pretty scrappily in a back office system to start off. It was built in a hackathon in a few days, the original proof of concept, and then built more into a proper solution on our main Contentful platform. But it was then used by the content, our partner team, who are all the writers, to generate lots and lots of chatbots for their content working in the first half of the year. Previously, I think I said to you, like, a chatbot, to make one of those kind of informational chatbots that you might see like the Little Face chatbot, or your day one of your period chatbot on Flow. Those chatbots would take sort of a couple of months, roughly, maybe 6 weeks, if it was a good one, if it was a kind of tight process. And now that sort of chatbot, could be made in under 2 weeks. It should be shorter than that. I acknowledge.
What were you going to say, under 2 hours?
2 hours, but yeah, so it had significant impact. I've got another team at the moment who are looking at localization of our pushes, and with that we're looking at how we could take a process that was around 43 days, 45 days, down to maybe 2 to 3 days, which is pretty significant. The time that it would take to localize, release, test, a piece of just a push, basically a push campaign. How can we get that down from 43 days to 2 to 3 days? Not just through AI, but through automation as well. So more automated process and AI-based solutions to help that. So we see a lot of benefit. The chatbots was a great example, which is now we're using it in other content forms like surveys, and now we're looking at the case for other types, like stories, for example. So we have a proof it can work. We have a proof that we know it can significantly reduce the time that it takes to create, edit, review, release content on the app.
Are you still doing a lot of reviewing manually at the moment then?
Yes. So it's actually quite interesting, because like I mentioned, we worked on evals as part of conversational AI. That's where it all started, because it was so critical with a live model which customers are going to interact with. Like, how are we going to measure that? And so we started working. We called them judges, but they are evals. So we worked on those with medical in the start of the year. And these are evals which are checking a medical piece of criteria to do with whether we're talking about anything which might be like clinically sensitive, or whether that we have to be very careful, because Flow is not a medical device. So we have to have these guardrails in position. We have to be having evals that can check whether the LLM is performing correctly, that it's giving information and not advice. And so we don't want it to be too directive in its tone. So there are a number of different evals created with medical team that are testing that. And it was not long after we started building those evals that we realized that these could be repurposed across Flow. So we also need to check that we're not giving medical advice if we were maybe generating a story or generating an onboarding flow as well. So this is not an isolated problem. It's a common problem for any piece of content. It does, conversation AI, it's more definitely a higher risk because it's a live model. But if we're using an LLM to localize or generate some kind of content, then having an evaluation that is automated that would check whether it gave medical advice or that it was doing anything clinically risky, you could run a check on that even before somebody comes to review, would be, you know, very valuable. So we stumbled across that pretty early on, that we realized we had a tool that could be used across many different teams at Flow.
Could you imagine how transformative it'd be to cut some of them processes down from like 40 odd days to 2, and then from 6 weeks to 1 or 2? The amount of time, money, resource that would be freed up by reducing those timelines would be massive for Flow, right?
Yeah, it would be massive. So not only, it would allow probably, you know, not only like engineers and release managers, but many people to focus on, like, you know, bigger, more sizable, exciting initiatives. We've always got only so much capacity to go around, and we at Flow we use OKRs, and we try and have a very focused set of initiatives for the year, and that will, you know, take up a lot of capacity. There are always loads of ideas that float around a startup, and it's now, you know, you have to wait for the right time for that idea to land. And so there are loads of great ideas, but there's no capacity to kind of work on them, or it's not the right time. So I often think, like, well, if we were more if we could be more efficient in some of this, then we could be doing all sorts of exciting things, couldn't we? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's interesting to think about what you could be doing, right? If you saved all that time. Side note, do you still call Flow a startup?
I think it's officially a scale up. I agree. It's definitely not in startup, and the way that Flow operates is far away from the sort of scrappy startup mentality. Definitely, I'd say a scale up now.
I don't know if there's like a consensus or like a typical definition of when you go from startup to scale up, but a decade in business, 73 million monthly active users, I would definitely say you've come out of that startup phase.
Yeah.
Good. They come in all shapes and sizes, startups though, right? With what you were just talking about there, when you said about release managers and engineers and all those other people in the business, that actually leads me on to my next question nicely, because I wanted to ask you about culture. And how culture plays such a big role in what we're talking about here when it comes to innovation. So, as a senior person within a business, how do you foster a self-motivated engineering culture that, you know, not just distributed, but also focuses on transformative AI use cases?
Yeah, I think I said Flow's a really interesting one, because I think the way the sort of person who's attracted to working at Flow, and the kind of inherent culture that is here and has always been here, is quite entrepreneurial people. So many people who come to Flow, we have a lot of people who are sort of have founded their own startups in the past.
Oh, really?
Who are often here at Flow. So there are definitely certain traits that you observe, like which I observed as soon as I came here, with how proactive people are, how curious people are who work here, how driven people are who work here. So I think naturally the culture that exists at Flow was pretty ripe for something like AI that comes in, and the engineering culture definitely means that you've suddenly got a whole pile of people who are very proactive and interested in this area, and same in product as well. So I observed pretty early on that there were just that there were pockets of people doing quite interesting work in AI. There were just very proactive product managers out there, like my product manager who runs the sort of the survey engine, which has a lot of the programmers onboarding. He was just very proactive at getting into using AI tools as part of his platform area, and he's very good at prototyping as well. So seeing seeing sort of hubs of people using AI, I thought, well, what we can do is try and bring people together. So I I sort of created a product meetup within Flow where different product teams and we, product designers, content designers, localization colleagues, everybody can come together and share and demo what they're doing. And I make it kind of both ways. So we obviously still have our kind of outward customer facing AI work that we're doing still in conversational AI, but then we have all of this work that is internal facing, where we're looking at how we're using AI in content production, how we're going to use AI to automate our kind of QA, how we're going to use AI within all sorts of aspects, and how you can use AI day to day. How can you use AI day to day better in your role, whether you're a product designer or a product manager? Like, what can you be using AI to make yourself more efficient? So
or a parent.
Yeah. So we have a product meetup, which is to demo, to spark kind of seeds of curiosity with people, for people to talk to each other who have synergy of what's going on. So we're kind of doing that, and the engineering community have done exactly the same. So the engineering side of the organization, they actually already had an ML gathering, because ML and AI is actually not new at all at Flow. We obviously have ML and AI because that's what makes your prediction on Flow. So there was already ML engineers at Flow before the generative AI kind of revolution took place. So there already was a kind of community there. So their community has just expanded and lots more people join that. There's been a really great adoption with tools like Cursor in the engineering half side of the organization, and they have an interesting gathering where they're talking about deep ML and AI topics, but also how they can use it with their code base as well. So we've kind of we're doing it in that way. I know other companies who are doing it in different, maybe more structured ways. It is quite organic at Flow at the moment. But yeah, it's working for us right now.
That's really cool. I like that, how you created your own community, your own meetup, and you pull people in from various different areas within the business. It's not just a closed group. And I think something that I've underlined in my notes here is where you said we come together and we spark seeds of curiosity. I think as long as you continuously do that and you're constantly evolving and looking at ways that you can bring people together to spark those seeds of curiosity, I think you can still call yourself a startup, right? Because you're kind of looking to disrupt, you're looking to change things, you're looking to bring new ideas to the table and go, okay, bang, we don't need to wait, let's just crack on with that. There's no bureaucracy, there's no levels of approval we need to go through. You can just run with a project if you feel like it's going to be a benefit to the company, right? So by definition, you can be agile like a startup.
Yeah, well, a lot of the time, I'm just really keen that product people at Flow understand the tools that are at their disposal, because there are a lot of AI tools that are readily available at your fingertips that we give you. So I try, again, we have like a AI product management channel. So I like to share their, kind of cool tips, hacks that you can use as an AI product manager, like you should, how to make a prompt to write your user stories, how to create a good deep research prompt for looking at a particular market, how to make a prototype using something like Figma Make. So I think with product managers, the best way is for people to see it honestly with a demo, to see somebody say, oh, this is how you do it, this is how you script a prompt, this is how you put the examples together, here's how you create a little mini data set. So
something visual.
People learn by kind of seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like that. One thing that I really wanted to talk about that was quite important to me when we spoke is that you mentioned how AI has huge potential to empower women and improve women's health outcomes. So what I wanted to ask you is, can you just tell me a bit how you think technology might be able to help close the gender inequality gap that exists in healthcare?
Yeah, so the way I like to imagine it is that we have almost the perfect storm right now of the intersection of AI coming together with what I hope will be a huge uplift in wearables and trackers coming at the same time. So these two areas together should come at a point where it means you're going to be far more in tune with what's going on within your body than you ever had the capacity to know before. So that if all of that data is understood and patterns are identified in a huge amount of data, like if we're thinking of wearables that are coming down the market right now, you've got kind of CGM trackers, so glucose monitoring. We've got, we've already got things like Oura temperature trackers, but you can imagine there's a huge amount of potential in the sorts of wearables that we might be able to have, particularly to do with women's health. So I think that perfect storm of wearable data and AI is going to mean that you're going to have, a far better understanding of what might be going on within your body, and a far better understanding of I like to imagine a world where you would know your period prediction like within an hour. So
within an hour.
I'd love that.
Could you imagine?
Like your period's going to arrive at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. Like how
Could you imagine?
This, this is my dreams of what could happen in female health. But to be able to have that kind of power, to be able to easily take photos of anything, women's health related, upload it, get a quick view. With medical devices, you could get more. You could get definitely like more towards some sort of a diagnosis. So there's a huge potential, and I just think because many women's health conditions have been very underfunded. It takes women with PCOS 10 years to get a diagnosis, repeatedly visiting the doctor with symptoms before they're actually getting the diagnosis they need and a discussion about what the treatment options might be. So it's arming women with the information that they need to have those discussions with their doctors as well, and to really be able to push for what they want. It's about health literacy when it comes down to it, with being able to argue and advocate for yourself with the healthcare that you want, because I think most women know when something's not right. Know when there's been a change in their body, know that something has changed in their cycle. There's been some adjustment and things aren't looking right, things look different. But trying to have that conversation with a doctor, oftentimes they will say, well, you look a bit stressed at the moment, you've got a young child, maybe try and take it a bit easier, or go away and see if your cycle settle down and come back in a few months' time, and all of this. So it's not surprising right now that it can take 10 years for a PCOS diagnosis. So I hope having all of this information, having a deep understanding of your body will arm women with the right information to have those conversations and to advocate for themselves better, which will mean like better diagnosis, quicker diagnosis, better health outcomes for women ultimately.
What's PCOS?
It's polycystic ovary syndrome. So it's one of a number of conditions that relate to your periods and your cycles.
Yeah, I've never heard the abbreviation before. Yeah, absolutely. You hear horror stories about women in my family or friends kind of being just their issues being kind of like shoved under the rug a little bit, like, oh, it's okay. I've never heard somebody say a doctor or a GP has told them that they're overreacting, but I kind of get the feeling that that's what they're being told. Like, oh, you're just you're fine, it's going to be okay, it will settle down. And then it's like they go back again and it's the same again, they go back again and it's the same again. But it's like you said, like you know your body, right? So I think with this data, accurate data, proper information, it will give women the confidence to be able to push back and say, well, no, actually, look, because this is a trend here, and this isn't like a 1 day thing, right? This is like a 1 year thing that I'm telling you about.
Yeah, and AI has the capacity to solve what were like hard problems and hard engineering problems to solve. So to be able
Mm,
to perform these kind of analysis of patterns of data
mm.
sets was previously quite hard, quite time consuming. So AI suddenly, I think, unlocks problems for engineering teams which were just too expensive or too complex that just remained there for years looking almost unsolvable, and suddenly this technology comes on along and you're realizing, oh, there is a way finally to solve this big problem in a lot easier way than we ever had before.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I guess with that what you just said there, and that answer you gave, we kind of answered the final question that I had written down. But tell me if there's anything you want to add for context. So, improving health literacy is something that you've explored and that we've spoken about previously as well. So, when it comes to AI initiatives, how can they, or how can AI or the tooling or anything around what we've spoken about today help people really take control of their own health?
Again, this is a bit of a pipe dream of mine, but I know from, looking at a lot at health literacy, and Flo has run some brilliant studies with the scientific guys on health literacy as well. So we know that Flo, as it stands right now, does influence people's and improves people's health literacy. But a lot of that is obviously we have content on Flo, and so it's all about, here's some information. Now you're more aware maybe of the symptoms, maybe of conditions. So when these things present, you're more likely to go and seek attention. But the bit that comes after actually seeing that information is knowing what to do. And with AI, there's a huge amount, I think, of potential to use it actually in the localization space of Flo, because I do think it would be pretty monumental to be able to understand what healthcare system looks like in your country when you need to go and speak to an obstetrician and gynecologist. What does that look like in Spain versus France versus the US? Like, what should you
Mm,
do if you have insurance, do not have health insurance? And some countries are very private healthcare focused, and other countries in Europe are very much a public health system, and they look totally different in terms of what you would need to do. In the UK, you go and visit a GP. Like, we people, if you said to somebody in France like GP, they'd be like, what is that,
yeah.
So and there's a huge number of steps you have to go through in the UK to even see an obstetrician and gynecologist like in person. So huge number of steps to go through. There's blood tests to do. They It's quite, I think it would be like just the knowing that something's wrong, to actually somebody sticking through a healthcare system and getting to see an obstetrician and gynecologist in a different country. It would be amazing to use AI in a way to localize that, to help give people advice on their own healthcare systems in their own countries, with what you need to do to set yourself up for success, to move through the healthcare system quickly and efficiently, without being sort of fobbed off basically at different points in the process. So you would want to know, like, what is the fastest way for me to speak to a consultant? What should I do in
Properly
this?
speak to someone.
To
Yeah.
probably speak to somebody. I know something's wrong, and I just need to zoom through this system and talk to somebody. So it's, I think there's a huge, like, the localization in a true sense of the word of not only providing people with health information, but then also providing with people with like the next steps, like, now what do I do? Now how do I go and see someone to talk about this in my country, in my culture? I think that would be hugely impactful, because I think, and I've witnessed it from working at Bupa, people find it even in the UK extremely hard to navigate our healthcare systems
Yeah.
with insurance, with the NHS, with self-pay. It's a nightmare in the UK, and it's very much, going to be a nightmare in other countries as well. So even somebody who's worked in healthcare for many years can find our system incredibly confusing.
Yeah.
So I just think there's definitely a way to use AI to improve health information for essentially pathways to help people get to speak to a consultant a lot faster.
Yeah. Yeah, good. And a perfect place to close the conversation, I think, because there's probably a consensus that anybody that watches this or listens to this can agree with. So I usually ask what next for Flow, but I think with the two pipe dreams that you've mentioned, we've kind of covered that, right? So being able to predict your period down to the hour, and then being able to empower people with as much information to fly through the system to speak to somebody
Yeah,
properly,
I
right?
should say these are my own personal
Yeah.
pipe dreams, not official, but I think these are noble goals
Yeah.
for women's health. Yeah.
It's your North Star. Well, look, Alison, this has been really, really cool. I'm so glad we finally managed to get to do this. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing what you do and the important work that Flow are doing. I know that, like I said, in my household, Flow has been quite an important app for us. So I'm sure it's just going to carry on growing, and that 73 million will look like a dot in the ocean in the next 10 years, I'm sure.
That's great. Well, thank you for having me.
No worries at all. Thanks very much.